So I'm going to talk about some research that's really a collaboration with colleagues at Texas A&M University. And the presentation, in a sense, is a bit of a dialogue that we were having around this topic of systems integration. And so my chair at Imperial is around systems integration. And so we started to have this discussion about how do things come together in mega projects? And how do we think about mega projects? You'll know the challenges of delivering large construction projects. A mega project is seen as a project that's typically $1 billion or more. So it's quite a loose definition, but it's those very large, extremely challenging projects. It can be transformational, it can have a substantial impact on communities, environments and budgets. And it can be very complex, involving multiple public and private stakeholders. And so we were thinking about how these were delivered. One of the major challenges in the successful delivery of mega projects is to make all of the project constituents, the humans, the information, the resources, work together as a whole effectively and efficiently. And I've spent a lot of my career looking at the digital delivery of these kinds of projects. So how are these projects put together and delivered, and how does digital technologies help us in that process of delivering it? In this presentation, we're mainly looking at that challenge of coordination. So thinking about systems integration in mega projects is a process of making a system coherent by managing interaction across system elements. And seeing systems integration as a promising approach for coping with complexity and identifying risk and building resilience in project systems. And actually the work that Jinju has put on the slides here was the paper that kind of initiated our conversation around this. There's a growing literature on systems integration in mega projects. However, there's not really formalized frameworks that provide a kind of taxonomy-based description and evaluation of systems integration in mega projects. And so the objective of this paper was to propose a formalized framework towards systems integration theory in mega projects, looking at this as a systems of systems. And so the kind of three pieces of that are to think about mega projects as a system of systems, to put together a systems of systems framework towards kind of systems theory, systems integration theory, and to think about the implications of that proposed framework. And so my colleagues in Texas were dividing out the different kind of levels that we could think about the construction project, the mega project on, as a system of systems, as a series of systems, as some subsystems, and then at the activity level and the base level, and starting to think of those different levels of abstraction of the project, if you like. At a very basic level, that's about the kind of the people and the information that they're using, and then sort of moving up the levels of analysis to the sort of multiple level integration, assembling components which are operational, sort of interdependent systems. And you can compare this with things like the work breakdown structure that we tend to use in mega projects. But it's a different way of beginning to think about that practice of coordinating and bringing a mega project together. I think for me what was most interesting about the work that we were doing was starting to think about some dimensions of systems integration and indicators of systems integration. And beginning to sort of articulate out the different levels of integration within a project, but then these different kinds of integration. So if you look at major projects, then of course they plan for integration, but you see this kind of emergent pattern of integration on the project as well. So we did work on Heathrow Terminal 5, a major airport. They planned, they coordinated, they made decisions about the design which were really about limiting interdependencies. But you still get this kind of set of emergent interdependencies through that process of delivery, and so how do you deal with those sorts of emergent interdependencies at different levels? We can think about that in terms of being social, in terms of being technical, and in terms of these kind of different stages at which integration can take place. And so we put together some indicators of systems integration in megaprojects. The first one's really about what is the degree or amount of systems integration. So how much pulling together the interfacing subsystems is needed in projects. And there's a big literature behind this about modularity and how you divide out projects, how you do the systems architecture. But I think it's an interesting idea to have an indicator for the degree to which systems integration is needed on these projects. So why is the degree of systems integration important? The degree of integration affects the organisational structure and thus the functionality of the system of systems. And so I'm coming to the 7 indicators that we identified for systems integration. So some of them are familiar: coordination, proximity, but some of them I think are kind of interesting and new. So around exclusiveness of interaction, around autonomy of parts, around interaction density, around coherence, and around substitutability of parts. And I think they're useful ways for us to think about how we bring things together on construction projects. This idea comes out of work on integration in a very different field, and I think brings us some new ideas into the construction space as we start to think about how we bring construction projects together. And so some possible implications and future work. The work with Texas is really looking at a formalised platform for description of systems integration in projects. Their interest is in then going to create quantitative methods for the assessment of systems integration, and then looking for ways to optimise that, to identify pathways leading to optimal levels of systems integration in different scenarios. And I just want to stop for a moment and say, you know, if you think systems integration is a solved problem, it's absolutely not, right? And I have, you know, there are many, many examples where that phase of the project where they're trying to integrate all the systems, they find they just cannot do it. And it's getting more difficult as buildings are getting more cyber-physical in nature. So as we have more digital technologies embedded with the physical infrastructure, then this challenge of how do you integrate all of those is becoming more difficult, frankly. And so you have a major airport in a European country that hasn't been able to open because they couldn't integrate all of the systems. And so this isn't a challenge that people are finding difficult because they don't know how to do engineering. It's a challenge because our systems are getting more complex. We're trying to integrate more systems as we add the digital technologies to these buildings. And frankly, the complexity is outpacing our ability to address it. And so you know, that's the reason that I think these sort of indicators are sort of an interesting approach to start to think about that complexity in these kinds of projects. So thank you. Any questions?